The family's like, oh, he's not ready. He doesn't care about when he's wet. He doesn't care about the bathroom. And in my mind, I'm like, that's a signal to me. We really have to start trying because those signs may never come.
Welcome to the Misfit Behaviorists podcast. Join your hosts, Audra Jensen and Caitlin Beltran, here to bring you evidence-based strategies with a student-centered focus. Let's get started.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Misfit Behaviorists. It's Caitlin and Audra here. And just a reminder before we jump in to, if you haven't already, check us out on Instagram, same name, Misfit Behaviorists Podcast. And we also have a Facebook group where we pretty much, with every episode, drop a freebie or something cool in there for you. So if you're looking for those freebies that we mention, that's where you can find it. But Audra, what are we talking about today?
We are going to do a two-part episode on toilet training, which I know is everybody's favorite thing to talk about, especially as the beginning of the summer. And we were just talking before we started the recording that we would probably do these two and then do a couple of other things throughout the summer. And then maybe at the summer, we would circle back and do another one before the school year, because I know a lot of people have toilet training, potty training on the mind in the summer and all the times, because it's such a big thing that we deal with both at home and at school and at clinic. So we are going to start to talk about toilet training today.
Totally. And I know we mentioned, I think in our last episode when we talked about getting ready for summer, just like what a prime time it is to tackle toilet training or to start it, just because you're wearing less clothing, you're flexible schedule, potentially you're more flexible. So that's why we're saying we do have a lot of toileting goals coming up, I'm sure, amongst all of ourselves.
Yeah. Toileting is kind of the bane of everybody's existence. I don't know why it's such a big thing, but it really is. It's the transition from this full dependence of somebody on everything that you do, this 100% dependence on somebody, into some level of independence, and it's also this amount of autonomy that we've talked about recently, this amount of independence they have, this dignity that it gives to them. So this really is a big topic. It's also, getting out of the diaper stage is really nice, and it's so nice to be able to get out of that. And if you are in the clinical field, or if you are a parent and you have to clean up the poopies of the older children, it changes from those cute little babies, especially when they're really little and they don't smell so bad and they're not so bad to clean up. As they get older, it's not as fun and it's much more difficult to clean up. And I have, over the years that I've been doing this, I have cleaned up some of the nastiest things you could ever imagine. And so the idea of being able to get somebody to be able to clean up after themselves, to be able to use the toilet on their own, it's a big topic and it's an exciting topic. It's great for them. Like I said, it's a lot about dignity and autonomy and independence. And so it's a very exciting thing. And I had two kids that were very different. So I had one whose potty training was extensive. I think it was about 6 years that it took to potty train him. So it was a very long, extensive battle at times. It's very difficult to get him to understand not only what to do, but to feel his body, because he didn't have those sensations. It was hard for him to connect what was happening in his body because he didn't feel it. He didn't actually feel what was happening. So that connection was difficult. And then the other one, she was 2.5 and she's okay, I'm just going to do this from one day to the next. It was just like, it was really easy. So you're going to have kids who are very different. And so figuring out each student, each child that you have at home is going to be very different. So have you seen that in your own life? Has it been different?
I think just for me, what came to mind was I had helped in toilet training so many kids for literally like 20 years. So when I had my own and he was of age, I was like, this is going to be no problem. Like, I am going to do all these things. And I have to admit, even though I know, and I've told so many parents, like, every child is different. What works for you might not work. I was like shocked when he was not fully toilet trained within 24 hours. But it was such a cool perspective to see it firsthand, in addition to helping the families at school and the families I work with at home and really going through that process. And we definitely started maybe a little too early because I was overconfident, and then had to put a pause in it and then just like regroup a couple of weeks or months later. And that second time was successful. But
Yeah, well, I remember the one, we didn't start with him until he was at least 3.5 or 4 because we knew not to start it too early because he just wasn't ready. He didn't have the language. He didn't have any understanding. But so we waited until 3.5 or 4. And even then, I mean, we were going with the no pants and, just lots of liquid, did the whole thing. And I remember this one time and he was standing on a chair because he was still little, standing on a chair, doing something on a table. And he started peeing right there. And there was pee getting everywhere. And he was just continuing to do his thing. And he had no idea that it was even happening. And I'm like, dude, there is pee coming out of you right now. And it's everywhere. He just had no idea. I mean, and it was just like this light bulb. Like, he can't even feel that it's coming out of his body. This is like this huge wake-up call. And the thing for him, finally, it was we started watching the videos of the thing that was interesting to him. I think it was Blue's Clues at the time. He was super obsessed with Blue's Clues or Bear in the Blue, whatever it was. And so we watched him obsessively because that's what he did. And we had the little potties all over the house, and we were doing the no pants thing, and he was in the backyard, and it had been weeks or months. I don't know how long it'd been. I just had finally given up. It's never going to happen. I was going through it. It's never going to happen. But he was outside, and he had the little notebook, and I remember he ran in, and he sat down in one of the little potties, and I heard the sound. And he had the notebook, and he was like, da 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 da, or whatever the sound was, the Blue's Clues sound. And I was like, it happened. I couldn't believe it happened. It was like, and and from there it still took 4 years from there.
Yeah,
but still,
what
it was
a
like
milestone to celebrate.
Huge. And like I said, the other one, it was just like, we're going to Disneyland. And she's like, I don't want to wear diapers, and that was it. Like, okay.
Yeah, it'd be nice if that was everybody.
No kidding.
I mean, it brings us into, I guess, our first topic of just those signs of readiness. And I know you hit on a couple, like the sensation, but what do you think? What do you share with families that are looking for, okay, like when are they ready? When is that magical time? Like they're ready.
Yeah. So all of the developmental milestones that we talk about are really, we talk about a lot of these with families. And I always preface this with, we talk about these as like typically developing developmental milestones. So all of these things we're going to talk about as like signs of readiness. I always caveat these with, in a perfect world, these are signs of readiness, because we've had to train lots of students who do not have any of these signs of readiness. And sometimes we do have to do that. So there's that caveat, is we're going to talk about quickly kind of these signs of readiness. And there is that caveat that this may not be your child anyway. But signs of readiness typically are developmental milestones are like bladder control, that awareness that they're wet or they're dry. They don't like to be soiled. They don't like to have that wet diaper, that heavy feeling in the diaper. They have the ability to pull up or down their pants. They have the ability to take off their own clothing. They're longer. Sometimes they're dry in the mornings. So you start to catch that. So that longer periods in between those. So kind of those physical signs that they're able to hold it longer. And I've seen a lot of them, just that kind of discomfort of being in wet pants. So that's one of kind of those physical signs is the first thing that I look for.
Yeah. And then you mentioned it already, but just having that interest, right? Like I've seen a lot of times, like more of the behavioral signs of, oh, what's going on in there? What's dad doing behind the door or something like that? And just pointing to it or even saying pee pee potty or anything. If there's an older sibling in the house, just observing and us observing them watching it and thinking like, oh, some wheels are turning.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I see that, I see kids who are doing that. I really encourage families, you can't really do this at school, but I encourage families to not be shy in the bathroom, to really let those kids watch dad go to the bathroom. It's really okay. Even girls watch dad go to the bathroom, and girls watch moms or boys watch moms go. They need to see that. It's really okay to see private parts and stuff and to watch the process.
Yeah,
it's like,
take the shame out of it, right?
Please,
like, this is a natural thing.
Yes. Watch animals go to the bathroom. Everybody Poops. Yeah. Really. Yeah. That's one of the best books, by the way. It's Everybody Poops.
Yeah.
And it's
scary for a child.
No kidding. And that is one of the things that you talk to a lot of psychologists is that there's a lot of suppressed trauma and scare, worry about what's coming out of your body with some of these little kids. There's like this anxiety. And that's why we get a lot of these kids who hold back, especially poop for that reason, because and you flush it in the toilet and it goes out of the toilet, and where does it go? And so there's all this fear about it. So take that all out of the way. Just be really open about it and relaxed, and it's not a big deal. And fart, it's okay. It's one of those things. So that's one of the other things. So the emotional signs too, the emotional readiness, showing independence, a willingness to try new things, that feeling, again, that kind of autonomy, independence, they want to do things on their own. And remembering again that children do all develop in their own pace. Some may be two, some may be 2.5.
That's so important. And I know you said it in the beginning, but that every child is different, but especially for a child with a disability, and especially if that disability is pretty severe, you might not see these signs when you think you're going to see them. And you don't want to start too early, but you don't want to wait until you see them. If you have a child that's 3, 4, 5, and I've had this happen where the family's like, oh, he's not ready. He doesn't care about when he's wet. He doesn't care about the bathroom. And in my mind, I'm like, that's a signal to me. We really have to start trying, because those signs may never come. And then we're going to be starting with somebody who's used to their routine and they've been in diapers for 5 to 7 years. And it's just that much more of an uphill battle.
Right.
So it's just completely different when you're thinking about different variations in individuals, and you want to be aware it's not like a typical child where you're always going to see those readiness signs.
Right. And we don't want to talk about this as if we're talking to a family thinking about their kid at home. I really do want to talk about this. If you have a child at school and you're seeing somebody these readiness signs, or you have a student, you're like, even if you're not seeing these readiness signs, you're like, I think they could do this. I think they learn things in such a way that we could train this, bring that family into the discussion and have that team working together. I wouldn't want either set of the team, either part of the team, either side of the table doing it on their own. So open up the discussion and working together. Yeah. And you may introduce this, and I've had this happen. We introduce the family, and they're like, you really think that he could do this? And you're like, yeah, he totally could. And open it up, and they're like, all right, let's do it. And you get them working together, and all of a sudden, 2 months later, you got this kid that's going to the bathroom on their own. It's amazing. And then you have this family who's so grateful because they had no idea that they'd be able to do that. That's huge. Right.
Yeah, we always encourage our families, like, you may want to start at home, even just for the weekend or something, just so you can gauge as a mom or dad or guardian, like your comfort level and how the child responded. But after that, like that first day back from the weekend, tell us exactly how you're doing it, what language you're using, time to go, time for bathroom, and also send in all those supplies. Send in 10 pairs of underwear, 10 pants, extra slippers in case they get kicked off or soaked. Send in double the amount of clothes you think you need, because you never want to get to that third day and just be like, oh, we ran out of clothes. And then we kind of lost momentum.
Yeah, and making sure that the family knows that it's okay when they have accidents. That we're not going to judge them about the accident. It's going to be okay. The accidents happen. Right. It's fine. That we don't want to go backwards. Once we start on this path, as much as we can avoid having to go back to diapers, we want to avoid that. That we're not good, because I think a lot of families worry that, oh my gosh, I feel so bad. They made all these mistakes. It's like, we don't care. We would much rather keep plowing through all of those mistakes and get to the end rather than go back and have to try again.
It's such a huge goal. Like we said in the beginning, the dignity, the celebration, the independence. I mean, if you have a child who's going on 4, 5, 6, and the family is, or even the staff, I've had some resistance in the past with staff that it's like, well, taking away all this time from program, or, I mean, how valuable are those skills that they're going to learn? How could that possibly be more valuable than the dignity of being able to control going into the bathroom and going yourself?
Yeah. Forget about the letters and numbers for 5 months even. Just forget it. It's so much. It's huge. So yeah, I love that.
So let's talk about, some specific approaches that you have used.
Yep. So I thought about kind of categorized them into the child-oriented approach and like the parent-led approach. And so like the child-oriented approach is kind of the softer approach where you're using the child's lead. There's like this elimination communication, which is more kind of, it's really typically developing, but it's very kind of infant-centered from the very beginning. You're responding to their communication overtures. It's very gentle, focused on that child's lead. I never used it myself. This is more kind of responding from a very, very young age and like putting them on the toilet like all the time. So I have never used that. And that's kind of in one extreme. And then all the way to just the kind of the gentler, less pressure, following the child's natural lead, readiness, cues. With this, you make it a very positive experience. This, you're going to have less likely to cause power struggles. You're going to lead to more independent potty use. Kind of the cons of using just this kind of child-centered approach is it often takes a little bit longer because it's just following the child's lead. It requires that patience and consistency from kind of the caregivers. It's less predictable and causes, because of that, kind of more accidents, and which is harder to fix. Now, because of kind of that child approach, often kids with disabilities don't do as well with this, kind of just as a general rule. That's not consistently true. I mean, there's some kids with disabilities who do fine with just this child-led approach, that's just consistent. Right. I mean, it's just individualized, right? Often we have to kind of go with a more structured approach, which is that parent or instructor-led approach. And there's a lot of, and I don't know what you've done, but I've mostly gone with more of the kind of structured parent-led, instructor-led. Yeah. And so, there's lots of different methods. If you look out, that's where you find the books, which is like the structure. There's the 3-day potty training. There's one called Oh Crap Potty Training. There's potty training in less than a day. You're going to find all of these little different ones. I've read so many of the different books, and each one kind of is along the same lines, and you can find them all on Amazon. I pulled them up. I'm not going to pull them up right here, but you can find a bunch of them. The pros is it's quicker in kind of those initial stages because it's very structured. You're gonna feel the child with lots of liquids. You're gonna have lots of opportunities to practice. You're gonna go in very structured times, and you're gonna have lots of those practice times. You're gonna have lots of reinforcement. And then once you have those with the actual successes, you're gonna reinforce them and then extend the time in between actually those successes, and then extend that as success happens, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. And so we've started with like really small intervals even. So if we're using a structured approach at school, for the first time, I've had kids every 5 minutes. For the first day, we're just getting up, going to the bathroom, coming back, maybe 10 or 15 minutes by the end of the day. We're not staying at that interval forever. Like you're saying, we're extending it, but only once we see success. So maybe the first day, we're flooding them with a ton of opportunities. And then the second, third, fourth day, we're sticking to like something reasonable, right? Like within a school, if it's reasonable to take them every half hour or something. Right. And then we're tracking that data, which we'll talk more about next week, but to see that sweet spot of how long they can go in between, and then hoping to coast there for a little bit before we can stretch it out a little more, as long as the child can go, obviously, which is different for every person. I go 3 times an hour, sometimes so much water. I mean, if they're drinking a little Stanley Cup, like they're going, like flooding them with liquids just so that we have those moments for success, because when they are going, we're celebrating that.
Right. And that's the advantage of kind of this structured approach, is that you have all those opportunities, but you also have that data to know when to go, when not to go, when to extend that time in between taking them, and when not to.
Yeah, because
you're
had
shaping
kids
that.
Where we're going with a really dense interval. So like we're going every 25 minutes, and then turns out like, first 4 visits to the potty that day, they were dry. And before you really take the diaper off, it's really hard to gauge, even if you know your learner really well, just like their baseline of how often they go. Like I remember with my son, he was fully potty trained. And then at night, I just didn't even think about it. I was like, you're back in the pull-up. I was like, we'll talk about that in a couple of months. I was like, never thinking of doing both. And then the next day he woke up dry, and he was like, I don't think I need the pull-up anymore. And I was like, what? And then he never wore a pull-up overnight. I just didn't know he was the kind of kid that could hold it for a long time from right away.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of where that data, hello, we like data. That's where that comes in. That's where kind of that instructor-led approach really does well. The cons of that instructor-led approach some kids are stressed out by kind of that structure. So you have to be mindful of that. You have to be mindful of your learner. Is that is that going to cause anxiety? We have to be very mindful when we're talking about toilet training, potty training, that we're not causing anxiety, because it is one of those things that we do need to watch.
To address that, I know we're going to get into some obstacles, but just from right away, if you have a learner who's like, okay, I'm going to the bathroom, and then a half hour later, and like you're saying, some kids are just going with the routine, and other kids, it starts to become like, no, I don't want to go. And then the staff is like, well, I want you to go because I don't want that accident to happen. And that's where sometimes that differential reinforcement comes in. Like maybe they're getting something just for going and trying, and then they're getting something even more for avoiding. Not that we want to stress them that they have to go, because I've had learners just trying to squeeze out a drop to get that M&M or something.
No, I think that's wonderful. Yeah, and
Yeah.
actually that brings us to that hybrid approach is where
Right.
you are pulling from both of that child-led and that instructor-led approach. You're pulling from everything and you're building, and I think this is the perfect approach, is you're building a program that's specific to what that child responds to. So you may read this perfect book, this oh crap potty training or whatever, and you're like, I'm going to do this approach. But you know what? You may
Totally.
need to do some sort of differential reinforcement that doesn't follow what they're telling you to do, that helps this child respond. And so just making sure that you're responding to what this specific student needs. And I think that's really what we want to wrap up with right here, is that all of these things, everything you're going to read, everything that you listen to, make sure that you're only doing what is right for your student, whatever that is.
Absolutely. I was thinking even of the reinforcer itself. Like I've made so many different potty charts for some of our preschool learners, hanging them on the wall. But I found like in our autism and ABA classrooms, nothing beats that direct reinforcement. Like the potty chart is maybe too vague or too delayed for them. But with my own son, we used it. And with other preschool students, we used it. Like individualizing everything is key. I also suggest when you're first starting out and you're not sure if you're using direct reinforcement, try and save that reinforcer just for the bathroom if
Oh,
you can.
yes.
So, I mean, I know a lot of people just, that's common sense, but if it's not, because
Say it anyway.
that's where that communication between home and school comes
Yep.
into play, because you wouldn't
Yep.
believe how many times staff are like, oh yeah, we withhold M&Ms now. They're only for potty. And then
Yep.
the child, is leaving with a bag of M&Ms from dad's car or something just because we forgot to have that conversation.
Yep. In fact, one of the, I'm going to give in the giveaway this week, I've put a bunch of potty training stuff together. Everybody has charts, different things and stuff. So I put some in there.
Very cool.
Some charts, some toileting sticker charts and stuff like that. We'll put that in the Facebook group and some other things that you can download as well. One of the other things I forgot to mention, get creative too. Some of the things that we use for my son and some other kids, we've done potty timer watches for some kids who want to get to be more independent. They're really cheap little watches that just vibrate on a certain schedule for them to be independent on when to go. Make sure you're talking to your doctor about. If you consider, there was a time where we wanted him to be aware, like I said, he wasn't aware of the body itself. And we went to bedwetting alarm that went into his underwear. And it was like this little wire that as soon as it got wet, it buzzed. There was no electric shock or anything weird like that. It only had to do it one time. And he was so freaked out by the vibration that it made that connection that he needed.
Right.
It was only one time. And then all of a sudden he went, oh, that's what that sensation is. Make sure you have a medical doctor on your team or your BCBA or whoever is. So think outside of the box, talk to other people, make sure you are ruling out if you have anybody who has encopresis and what is the other one? And whatever, they're withholding urine or a stool. Make sure you have medical doctors as part of that.
Sure.
I've had students who did the digging and the smearing and the eating, and make sure you have everybody on your team that needs to be for medical reasons too. So watch for all of that as well. So we're going to keep talking about this next week and probably at the end of summer as well in the Facebook group, or email us or whatever. If you have other things you want to talk about, this is a great topic that can continue on forever with all the stuff that we could talk about. So feel free to jump in.
Yeah, next week we'll talk a little bit about writing goals, whether it's for your home programming or IEP goals, just to kind of monitor your success and how you're charting that data to make sure you're moving in the right direction.
Cool. Thanks for tuning in, everybody, and we will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Misfit Behaviorists, and be sure to tune in next week for more tips and tricks. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss an episode.